Hi guys, I am Mike. I am known as Rednaxell in the Riftbound community, and I got second place with Viktor on the most recent regional qualifier in Utrecht. I will be presenting my deck today to you, but before that I would like to say a couple of things more about myself. I am professionally a game developer. I develop video games for a living for the past, I think it's 14 years now. I have co-founded a small company here in Greece, Athens. And I have been playing games since I was like 8 years old. I started off with Pokemon, I think like most of the people, then went to Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, TCG, and then I moved on to most of the digital card games that exist. I put most of my effort in Runeterra. I had played a lot of Runeterra, and when the Riftbound came out, I actually felt, like a natural evolution to what I should put my time into. I've played a lot of Riftbound. I think I might have the most games in the world when it comes to Nexus Nights. I've played a lot, and it was almost all of the games are with Viktor. So I hadn't managed to get a pass on the regional qualifier, the previous two regional qualifiers in Europe, and so this was my first time participating as a competitor. And having so many games in Viktor, it didn't make sense for me to go with anything other than Viktor. So here I am. So as we know, Viktor, he can spawn a recruit every turn. This is the best of Viktor that I managed to earn in Utrecht. And we have Viktor Leader as the chosen champion. He creates a recruit every time a non-recruit unit dies, which is a very useful way to put pressure on the opponent. I'm gonna start with the battlefields. Usually we start with Forbidden Waste as the blind battlefield. Then we go for Rockfall Path if we lose, and we use the Arena's Greatest if we win. This is usually the order, unless you are playing with something that Rockfall Path is more useful with. For example, if you play with Rengar or LeBlanc, you might prefer to choose with this battlefield because it's much more of a hindrance for them than Forbidden Waste is. And Arena Greatest is practically the best battlefield for Viktor. I don't think I've lost a round, probably in the last 20 games that I've played, starting with Arena's Greatest. So these are the battlefields, and let's start off with the units. We got 3 Carrion Dredgers and 3 Honest Brokers. These are units that you are very much okay with them dying, so you probably want to start first round if it's possible with them being played. You don't really need to start with a recruit because these units can put much more pressure to the opponent even if they die. So it's a very useful tech to start first turn with these, and then on the second turn you want to do a token and usually keep 3 mana open, which can represent a lot of stuff. We're gonna talk about this later when we check the spells. If you play second, you also have a very good opening where you get a token and any of these 2 rune units. So these are the starting units. Then you have 2 Sprite Fountains. You could do 3, you could change the deck and add a third one. I didn't want to rely too heavily on the Sprite Fountains because at least on most of my testing, when the Vex was in the board, these were practically dead cards, so I didn't want to rely too heavily on them. Instead of the Sprite Fountains, I very much prefer Xin Zhao, which can be developed even if it's not something that it's going to be accelerated. This is a very good unit because, first of all, it kills the sprites of the opponents, and the 4 might. 4 is usually a number that Viktor has an issue with, so if it's necessary, you can trade in with the Xin Zhao into any 4 might unit, but they also need to do something in order to go over your Xin Zhao. So this is a very good unit to have. I prefer it much more than the Sprite Fountain. So a typical round at the beginning of the game would be that you develop any of those units on the first turn, and on the second turn you can follow up with this. Conquer 2 battlefields, force the opponent to deal with one or the other of the battlefield, and then be able to score another point on the next turn. So this is a way to create a lot of pressure on the opponent very early on in the game. Then we have 2 card sharp. This was probably the latest addition I did to my deck. I wanted to ensure that at the first turn, when you play second, you will have something that is much better than a simple recruit. So you either do a 2-drop and a recruit, or if you don't have a 2-drop, you can at least do a card sharp. The 3 might value that you have here, playing second, is very important because it can practically kill any 2-drop that the other player has played on their first turn. So it follows the pattern of creating early pressure to your opponent. Then we have Vi Peacekeeper. It's probably the best card that Viktor got in this set. It's very useful because you can play it even as a reaction during your opponent's turn. You can obviously play it as a reaction during attacking. I used to have 3 of those, but again, because I decided to mitigate my vulnerability versus Vex, I reduced this to 2. And usually the way that Peacekeeper works, it's what I like to do is versus decks that have a lot of buffs, for example Irelia or Yi, you usually attack with a big force, try to force some kind of buff from the opponent's side, and then you use Vi in order to nullify entirely both their unit and their buff. And sometimes they will be forced to play extra buffs just to keep their unit alive, but at the same time none of your units die during this combat, so you can just go in next turn again. We have 2 Watchers. I'm not sure that they did what they were supposed to do during the regional qualifier. You know, it's a unit that everyone plays around, it's a unit that everyone expects, but nonetheless it's a unit that you need to have in your deck. It would be played non-accelerated more often than it would be played accelerated. It's very good in Diana because you can just play it and then trade in with your 1-drops, the recruits, into either Vex or Diana or whatever they have. So Thousand Tail Watcher is a must-have, but it usually doesn't produce the value that it should, and sometimes I will even side it out. If I play first and I have the arena's greatest, I know that this will probably not make it into the game. If I play versus Yi, I know that this 7 might unit is almost as good as the punch first that the Yi will have, so I will probably never choose to play it because it can so easily be a punishment for me more than it can be for the opponent. Let's move on to the spells. You have 3 Stupefy and 2 Shadow's Call, which mostly function as a way to draw your other cards. Stupefy is very useful because Abandon Hall now is, it's almost everyone uses it, so Stupefy is a way for you to also take advantage of Abandon Hall. And it's also a very good way to create the small extra pressure that you need versus the other decks. So if they have a 3-drop, you want to Stupefy and go in with a Sprite. If they have a 4-drop, you want to Stupefy and go in with a Xin Zhao. It's a very cheap way of creating difference on the board. Then we have 2 Bellows Breath. It's been a staple for most of the Viktor decks since it came out. It could be 3. The thing is that Defy is so common right now, and it's such a big punishment to get to defy a repeated Bellows Breath that I didn't want to rely too heavily on Bellows Breath. But I think maybe you could have a 3rd one, perhaps on the sideboard versus decks that have nothing to stop it. For example, the best way to deal with LeBlanc would be Imperial Decree and Bellows Breath. Sometime I was missing Bellows Breath, so maybe you can have a 3rd Bellows Breath on the sideboard to fill in during these matchups. 2 Wages of Pain. It's one of the very good removals you can have early. It's not very useful later on, but it can still be used as a way to bluff hidden blades. So it was often that I didn't have the hidden blade in my hand, but I was hiding Wages of Pain representing that hidden blade that I needed in that current moment. Something that I like very much to do is develop a 2-drop on the first turn and conquer, develop a recruit, and then leave 3 mana open, 3 runes open. Which these 3 runes open represent a number of things that I'm going to point out later, including Wages of Pain. Of course, 3 Hidden Blades and 3 Cull the Weak. Cull the Weak is a must-have. There's no way of denying its value, especially now that we have the Carrion Dredger and the Broker and the sprites. You can very easily kill a unit that would probably die anyway, or that will produce some value even if it dies. Hidden Blade, I actually was considering of reducing it to 2 because it's a card that you don't ever want to see or use early, not on your units or not on the other units, and it still can be defied, which it's a problem when you're trying to kill something that sometimes it has a deflect or it can be defied, and you use Hidden Blade, which it doesn't feel great and still gets cancelled. Sometimes I didn't like it very much, but looking back at it, 3 Hidden Blades, 3 Cull the Weak is a must. 3 Imperial Decrees. It's probably the best way to close your games. It's, I think, the only way to close your game versus Yi. I almost win always with this card, and usually it is useful with Irelia to close the game. It is a little bit risky because if it gets abandoned, if it gets hard bargain and you've put all your chips on winning with this card, it's very likely that you will lose. But you can't really win a lot of matchups. LeBlanc as well, you need to finish the game with Imperial Decree because they have so much might, you can't really go over that. I used to have 2, but sometimes they get sabotaged, sometimes you don't draw into it soon enough, so I think you need to have 3. And then we have a few one-offs, which I think I really liked the one-offs and how they worked in my deck. Even with an open deck list, what you do on the second turn, as I mentioned before, first turn you develop a Carrion Dredger, they play their own turn, they do whatever, it doesn't matter. You go in, you conquer with a Carrion Dredger, and you have a second recruit in the back. Okay, so you have 3 mana open, okay, and you can combine these 3 mana. Are they going to attack into you? Okay, you have this, you have this, you have this. Are they going to go on the other battlefield? You have Wages of Pain. So it puts a lot of pressure on them. You can still do the Chakram Dancer even if they go to the other battlefield, just to keep your tempo up, retain some units. And even if they don't engage, even if you lose your floated energy, next turn you have a recruit in the back. You can develop another recruit or bring this one back and play Xin Zhao and go for the other battlefield. Most of the time, most of the decks, they felt that this had gone into the battlefield in order to die, and they felt obligated to engage with it. They didn't want this to stay on the board. And these things, they can't play around unless they defy it. I mean, Chakram Dancer on a Carrion Dredger produces 5 might, so if they come with a 2-drop, they need at least 2 buffs to go over it. Face Breaker just sends them back and they can't really do anything. Eclipse puts them again at least 2 buff deficiency level. So these are cards that they can't really, they have to, choose what they're going to lose to, and they practically lose to every one of them. And of course, you need a Salvage because there's a bunch of gear going on around. Usually this is very useful against the boots from Irelia. You can sometimes destroy a GA or destroy a Zonias, but most of the time these either get defied or stopped, or there's not really any value to actually killing a GA because you close the game with Imperial Decree anyway. So it's not, you know, something crazy, but you kind of need to have it for an emergency. Something that I like very much, I did a couple of games during the regional, was I played a Sprite Fountain, I salvaged it on the same turn, I draw a card and I produce 2 sprites on a single turn with Accelerate, so it's, you know, it's very easy for me to go over practically anything with a low cost. Let's talk a little bit about the sideboard. Nothing too special, it's a little bit of more of anything. One more salvage if you are playing against Aurora, Irelia, or anything that is, you know, Azir, anything too heavy. You have sprites. This goes in versus anything that doesn't have purple. You have another Eclipse. Eclipse is probably the cheapest way to kill a Vex. So you Eclipse, you still recycle, but then you trade in with a single recruit. It's quite risk-free and cheap to do. You have an Ass. I don't know why this is in here. It's, you know, it's kind of a flex spot. I thought that I might meet anything which I don't know how to deal with, so I had an Ass in order to be able to remove a card from the opponent. It's very useful against LeBlanc and anything Aurora, but I mean, it's okay. It's not that critical. You have Safety Inspector. I started off with very high hopes about the Safety Inspector, but it ended up being a 5-cost Kill a Scuttle card, and as the time went by, I disliked him more and more. He's on the sideboard for certain matchups that are already favorable. I mean, for example, anything that can respond to your Cull the Weak, they can also respond to Safety Inspector unless they have a Defy. So it doesn't really cover any bases that your deck doesn't cover already, but it adds, you know, if Cull the Weak is good, then Safety Inspector is also good, so you might as well have it. Singularity, I don't think I ever used it during the regional. It was also, you know, kind of a card like, why not? Probably you don't need it. It's good versus, it could be good versus Diana, but they use Abandon and Hard Bargain in a very unpredictable kind of way, so I don't really think that this is actually good. And then you have 2 pickpockets for facing Azir. It's also useful when you're facing Sivir, but you shouldn't worry about that. This should be 3. I would find space for a 3rd pickpocket, probably take out Singularity. Everyone is trying to play around Singularity anyway, so it puts the pressure that it needs to put on the opponent anyway. And I think this is it. I'll describe a couple of interesting interactions with the hard matchups and the battlefields. When you play into LeBlanc, you want to do this one first, and then if they win the battle, you want to do this one. If they lose the battle and they play first, you want to do this one. The reason for this is that they play first, they will probably play a 2-drop, and they use the ganking battlefield. So on their turn, they're going to conquer the ganking, produce a token, and also conquer the Forbidden Waste. Ideally, you have 2 units at that point, a 2-drop and a 1-drop. The 2-drop can go and conquer the ganking battlefield, and the 1-drop can go and conquer the Forbidden Waste. So this is very good when it's used with LeBlanc during his placement of the Hirana's Conservatory, I think it's called, or however it's called, the ganking battlefield anyway. This is it. I hope it's been helpful for you.